Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special edition of African Hour. And our focus today is on the Ambazonian struggle. Today is the 18th of April, 2021. And this day in history is quite, it's really a sad day for me and my family because we did lost my big brother and the son in a car accident from Douala to Bamenda. And also would like to pause to pay tribute to all our fallen uh, heroes that have paid the ultimate price for our liberation. We are on the way to victory. And I think that it is but befitting for us to pay homage to our people on the ground, in ground zero, those who have suffered, those who have died, those who are in the hospital, and those who are really paying a daily price for us to get our liberation. I would like to light a candle in their memory. And I would also like to, as we remember all of them, I will share my screen to show in memory of my brother and his son who died in an accident from Douala to Bamenda on April 18, 2014. Mr. Patrick Kimbeng and his son Ndande Kimbe. This candle shows that we will never forget those who have given their life for our struggle. Let us give a moment of silence. Thank you. Our special guest is someone who needs no introduction. He's coming in from Norway. His comrade Agbo Derek, Senior Advisor, Ambazonian Revolution, Oslo, Norway. Comrade, you are very welcome. And
Thank
before
you.
I bring you on, I would share a little bit about myself and about our struggle. I am not that very old, but I'm old enough to have grown during West Cameroun. And that in itself has made me to be able to compare what it was then with what we have been going through under the Ahijo Bia regime since they occupied our territory. I happen to be very fortunate that I did education on both sides. My primary elementary education in Bamenda, whereby the educational system taught us about civics, about governance, about the system to be able to understand the local government. Then, early 70s, I moved over to Njombe, and I also did the elementary education from cours préparatoire to cours moyen, whereby I also finished the first school living certificate in the French zone. And there I could see a difference that they did not really focus on civics. There was no civics to tell you about the local government and how things can be governed and respect our local heroes. So with that, I questioned so many things. And I quite remember my senior brother of late in the early 2000s He was a production manager at Semenkam in Douala, one of the highest Anglophone to occupy that post. He loved his job. He was a trained engineer from Boston, USA. He went there and he was doing quite well. So one day he called me and said he was going up to Garwa. He's been to train another subordinate. This guy was a Betty guy. While he went there and trained this guy, later on, the guy was posted in Douala. And he told me one day that he went up to Garwa. On his way back, the keys in his office had been changed, and this guy had already occupied his office and was now the manager. So that really brings to me a very, very feeling that we are not considered as equal citizens in that country. And it also resonates with the appellation that when I was in Cameroun, they would call us les Biafrais, les Nigériens, and that, I didn't quite really like it. When our struggle started, there is a lot that we have done that from lower. And I know each and every one of us is fighting this struggle in their various way. I'm one who does not ask, what have you done for the struggle? Because I'm in no position to do that. But the little that I can do, I provide platforms for our experts. I let them speak for themselves. I do not bring people to criticize others, but I bring people to share knowledge and let us work together in solidarity, as the eminent Professor Anyangwe rightly puts it, that all Ambazonian fighters, leaders should work in solidarity. So it is on that note that I bring in our senior advisor, Mr. Derek Abo from Norway. Sir, you have the floor. And before you take the floor, I would like you to maybe shed some light on what we are really fighting for, because generally we should be able to get a clear understanding as to what our problem is and what are the consequences of our problems that we are fighting. Because if all of us speak in one language, the international community would know that we are working in solidarity and that we know where we are going. So, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimben, for the good work you are doing for Ambazonia. And I believe that all Ambazonia have seen your good work because I can go on YouTube, I see the comments, and it's really wonderful. I will as well encourage you to continue. The Ambazonian history is a very broad history, and every one of us try to give a bit of what we know about Ambazonia. So a single person cannot actually describe everything about the Ambazonia struggle. But just as you asked, before we go to the marginalization, which you started in the beginning by giving your own personal experiences, I will just want to brief us about our struggle, why we are fighting. You know, the reason why we are fighting today is caused by just one and only one problem, which is the occupation of Cameroun in Ambazonia. This occupation is the sole problem of why we are fighting today. And of course, it has its own consequences, which actually today, some of our brothers who are federalists are trying to define them as root causes. But actually, they are not root causes. There's just one root cause and one solution. The root cause is the annexation of or the occupation of Ambazonia by Cameroon, and the only solution is Cameroon terminating its occupation in Ambazonia?
Let me just chip in yesterday, because yesterday the eminent Professor Anyangwe actually was able to explain the difference between a trust territory and a colonial entity. And he said that Nigeria was a colonial entity under the British, but Cameroon was a trust territory under the United Nations. In which case, if I rightly understood what he was saying, that Nigeria owed its independence from Britain, and as being a trust territory under the United Nations and administered by Britain, would it also be right to say that we owe our independence to Britain or to the United Nations? Can you elaborate on that? Because that, if that is very true, then La République was a trust territory administered by the French. So too, we were a trust territory administered by the English. So starting from that, you would see that we and La République are two different entities.
Exactly. The first thing is to be able to define who is a trustee. A trustee is someone who takes legal control over your possession, which means the legal system gives that person the authority to control, to take care of you. At one point, when they find that you are able of controlling yourself, they hand back the powers to you. So when we look at the trusteeship agreement, Britain was not our trustee. Britain merely came as a third party brought in by the United Nations, which means Britain was a trustee to the United Nations. And we, the territory of Ambazonia, or formerly called the British Southern Cameroon, was a trust territory to the United Nations, meaning that the UN was our trustee. What does that imply? It merely implies that the action of Britain was carrying action on behalf of the United Nations, which means the actions that Britain were carrying in these trust territories were carried out in strict conformity with the agreement they have with the United Nations. And the UN had also an agreement with us, and that is that agreement that most people don't even say. And I even see most even professors and even in universities and colleges, they don't tell people that the UN had a trust, had an agreement with us after the Second World War. They agreed that they will take control over us, train us, and grant us the independence. So they don't tell people that. So when they could not do all this job, they decided to bring in a third party. And in the case of Ambazonia, they brought in Britain. Britain accepted as a trustee to the UN. And then in French Cameroon, they brought in France. So our independence does not depend on the person who is a trustee to the UN, because they had just one function. The function was limited to sovereignty, that's preparing us for independence. So the Southern Cameroon, the British Southern Cameroon or Ambazonia today does not owe its independence to Britain, but rather from the United Nations.
So, so would it be right to say that we are doing the wrong thing, blaming Britain for not granting our independence?
Exactly. Britain was not responsible for granting independence. Britain, if you look at the trusteeship agreement, very clearly, if you even start from Article 8 going down to 11, 12, you will find that Britain's actions were limited just to sovereignty. They could do certain things. For example, they could decide to change to divide the territory, which actually they did. So Britain is not wrong by dividing Southern Cameroons and the Northern Cameroons. They had the right given to them in that trusteeship agreement. And that's why you see they proceeded. So even if you sue Britain today that they divided the British Southern Cameroon, you will not make it out because they had that authority from the trusteeship agreement, which they had with the with the UN. So our people should not go about, accusing Britain, because you will never defeat them. They have the trusteeship agreement. They will bring it in court and show that they were not responsible for granting independence. The sole body that was responsible for granting independence to the trust territories, it is one specified trust territory, was the General Assembly of the United Nations, not even the Security Council, but the General Assembly, which they did.
Then on that note, if at the United Nations they voted 64 to 23 and how many abstention, because around that time the total membership of the United Nations, if my memory is correct, was 100, and then those who voted for us to get our independence were 64. So are you telling me now that by the United Nations they granted us independence by that vote?
Of course they did. They did grant us independence.
So, and then if I may follow up too, and then by that vote too, since French Cameroon was a trust territory, they also granted French Cameroon independence. So independence of French Cameroon was not given by France, but by the UN. Is that true?
Yes, you are right. Those are some of the things that the trusteeship administration played with the minds of the people. They deceived the people by telling them that they were the ones to grant them independence. And that was very, the people they were naive. They were not, most of them were people of moderate education. And you can imagine for 46 years, they sobered the French. And in our side, we sobered the English. So we told them, our people thought that, okay, these are actually the people to grant independence. So they never took time to go and know why those people were there and what were their limits. That was the mistake our people did. And in the French Cameroon, de Gaulle administration went around deceiving the people, telling them that, you see, you vote even for the economic cooperation, when you vote for it, then we will grant you independence very fast, which was wrong, because they were deceiving the people. The French administration knew very well that they were not allowed to take control of the resources of the people. So what they needed was an evidence to tell the other members of the UN that, no, these people freely entered into agreement with us, because it was allowed for nations to enter bilateral relationship. You could lobby with other countries and do that. So the French knew that if they don't ask these French countries to sign that agreement, that's the economic cooperation, then the world will stand against them. So they forced the people and deceived them. And together with Foncha and Ayijo's administration, telling them that, no, you see, it is important to sign it because these people will grant us independence. They never told the people that France or Britain was not responsible for granting independence. It was the United Nations.
Okay, so knowing that French Cameroon got its independence 1st of January 1960. So if we had the foresight and the wisdom at the time, we would have also equally declared our own independence. We were not even supposed to ask anybody or Britain, because at the UN they had voted 64 in our favor of independence, right? So
you're right.
So in which case, well, we are not blaming our forefathers. They did what they did within their own knowledge and at that time, because I hate some people always cast stones, but hindsight is 2020. I am not in the blame game. So now let's talk about the two countries, the two independent countries. The French Cameroon having its independence 1st of January 1960, and us, our own independence was to come. So, but we did not have that independence. So then how come you say that French Cameroon occupied us?
You're right. The mistake most Africans did when the UN declared that they were to decolonize all territories and grant independence to other countries was to follow the very countries who colonized them and countries who were set as trusteeship administering territories, which was Britain and France. The people who actually fought for the decolonization of territories in Africa are the Scandinavians. And that is what most people don't even say that. The Scandinavian actually put much energy. Remember, the first Secretary General was a Norwegian, Trivelli. And when he set the laws for decolonization, if you go and read Article 76B, all those things was set by him. And when he left office, a second Secretary General came from Scandinavia. That's the Hammarsdorf, who actually went from country to country, seeing that they were being decolonized, that they were granted independence. He was even in French Cameroon. So when he was to come to the British Southern Cameroon, in Congo, he was set up and he was killed.
That was during Patrice Lumumba's reign.
Exactly. And from there, the dynamics was cleared. If you look at the Gulf of Guinea, Ambazonia is in a strategic position between the east and the west in that Gulf of Guinea. And the French and the British needed that territory. So none of them wanted to see a full independent country without it being under their control. So it was a setup, which now each of these groups struggled to bring in part of our leaders to reason with them. But unfortunately, things went the way they are. And the United Nations could not actually come in as a body who knew very well that this is my child. They did not come in to help us. They allowed this administrative authority to come out with solutions together with some of our leaders. And that is, because of that, they could not come out with a credible decision. There was what came in that was known as the two alternatives. Our people now were asked, in some way, some people will say they were coerced, that they were forced to do that. To some extent, I will agree with them, because when you force people to do something that they don't want, you are you are to be blamed. So the two alternatives, although it came because our politicians did not agree, I believe that the UN had that responsibility to come and say, no, we have granted these people independence. There is no conducting a plebiscite. Grant them their independence following Article 76B of the UN Charter and finish. But they did not. There was a game played at the decolonization committee. We should not forget the president of that decolonization committee I think he was a French, and then the secretary was a British man. So all what they were doing in that decolonization committee was just getting instruction from their governments. We should not forget that it's their governments that recommended those people in that position. So they knew what they were doing, and they brought in our leaders who themselves, to some extent allowed themselves to be manipulated. And here we find ourselves.
Maybe through our leaders allow themselves to be manipulated, but the French Cameroon representative were backed by a more experienced nation, the France. By the same token, I don't think we had such a godfather relationship with the British to stand behind us. Is that
no?
True?
We did not, because Britain wanted us to join its largest colony. Just from the beginning, you talked about the difference between a trust territory and a colony. We ceased to be British colony in 1889. And that is that is the history that French Cameroon does not want us to know. They always start telling you of Cameroon history from 1884. No, but we were a British colony from 1854 to 1889, when the Germans now had an agreement with the British. So we were transferred because we were known as the British colony of Victoria.
So are you saying that before the partition, of Africa in 1884. Prior to that, we were a British colony.
We were a British colony.
Good point. So
Well
it is from
established,
that point that the two Cameroons became German colonies, or what?
Come again, you say?
It is from that point that Cameroon became a German colony.
Exactly.
After 1884.
Exactly.
And
So
then Cameroon was broken into two parts after Germany lost the First World War.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, so it is very important to know that we were a British, we were that called a British colony. So when Cameroon is hiding this history, it is our responsibility as Ambazonia to bring it out, because we ourselves, we don't even tell that history to the world.
Okay, comrade, just 1 second. You know, this is a discussion. And Francis, hold on, please. This is a discussion, and I want many hits are better than one. And we are, Francis, it looks like you have something, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I just the last point that our wonderful presenter was giving, Comrade Derek was just talking about. I just wanted a little bit of clarity, because my understanding is that Cameroon, the German Cameroon, as we say, was not really divided into two, because the German Cameroon was a lot larger than the current constitution of La République and the Southern Cameroons.
I think it had Chad, Central Africa, and those countries. Yes.
I just wanted to just point that
you are right. You know, in 1891, when the Germans were still fighting, you know, the French, because they were fighting the French in the east while fighting the British in the west. And the reason was that the Germans the Germans wanted to capture the western part of Africa, because they had a colony. It was known as the German Togoland. So the administrator in French Cameroon, that the German French Cameroon wanted to link these two territories. And in order to link these two territories, the easiest way to do that was to capture Ambazonia. That's the British territory of the British colony of Victoria. And then they will have access now to attack Nigeria, which was the colony. From there now, they will proceed to connect these two territories. And then in the east, they were fighting the French. And now the French saw that the British had agreed to end the war with the French in 1889 by handing over Ambazonia to the Germans. And then, so the French now decided as well to end this war in 1891. So they signed the Franco-German agreement in 1891. When the French told the Germans that, okay, we will give you part of the Lake Chad Basin, we'll give you part of the Central African Republic, we'll give you part of Congo and Gabon. So these partners were attached to German Cameroon. So we now had the German Cameroon of 1891. So there were different German Cameroons. The German Cameroon of 1884 was just French Cameroon, which we know today. And later on, there was the German of 1898, which now incorporated Ambazonia. And then later on, we had now the German of 1891, which brought in this other French part. So it was actually, as you said, a very large territory, which after the Second World War, the French decided now to take back these territories from the German Cameroon. And the British as well, because they decided to take just their colony that was seized from them during the war.
Okay, thank you very much for that background information. I think with a solid background, now let's come home now to our current situation with Ambazonia and French Cameroon. When you mentioned that our major problem is not that of marginalization, it's not that of the legal system, the education, and all sorts of problems that we are going through, and that these are consequences of a major problem. And you mentioned that we have but one problem, and that one problem is the occupation of our territory.
Exactly.
Which, based on your history that you have just taken us through, it shows that these were two independent countries.
Exactly.
But now, how come that French Cameroon is claiming that we are one and indivisible? Could you shed light on the politics of that appellation, please?
You see, what gives Cameroon the right to do that is part of our own laxity. Ambazonians, we are so, we just we're doing things on granted that we can change French Cameroon. We can change the mentality of those people. But what we did not do was actually to go deep into their educational system to know what kind of education these guys have. Just as you said from the beginning, we had civics. When you study civics, it keeps you in a position of being a patriotic citizen. It makes you to respect laws. It makes you to respect the order, to know your limits, and to respect the institution of the country. But in the French Cameroon, they didn't have that. And what they have there is the command, they call it commandement. They just tell you that do this and you do it, you don't question. But in the English side, it is not like that. Because we have that civic education, it gives you the opportunity to sit in a broader perspective, of which in their own area is limited. Now,
hold that point there, comrade. Let me step in. I quite remember when I had Professor Patrice Ngana on my show. He said the reason why French Cameroon did not encourage civics into their curriculum was simply because the patriots, civics will enable you to talk about the local government, the people who run the country,
exactly.
Your patriots, those who are fighting for liberation.
Exactly.
And since the current leaders of French Cameroon today, Ahijo and Biya and most of them, were the ones who killed people like Mumie, Ernest Wandi, and all those other patriots, Umnyobe. So now it will be a very hard rock for them to be, it will be very, very suicidal if they get into that history. That is one reason why they intentionally ignore that part of the history of Cameroon. Is that true?
Yeah, that is exact. That is true. And to actually paint it, the political system of Mr. Biya came with very beautiful words. Oh, rigor and moralization. He came with grand ambition. He came with all those big words. They were just to cover, because they knew that once the people get educated, then there will be rebellion. And that is why you see they did everything possible. The French from day one had already arranged how to kill the political spirit of Ambazonia, how to kill the history of Ambazonia. So all what we see, those transitions we saw from United Republic to Federal Republic to finally La République was
Federal Republic to United
Republic
and then La République
to La
Cameroon,
République,
which
exactly.
was the name of French Cameroon during independence at 1960, January 1st, 1960, when we were not with them.
So all was just some kind of, it was a game. It's a political game that was planned.
But hold on right there. Yes, was it? It was a political game, but it was also a suicidal pill for them to go back to La République to Cameroon. By doing so, by that decision means they have made that Cameroon divisible.
Exactly. That is the calculation the Biya regime never saw. And that is why you see the French became very angry even with them. But it was too late to change because everything was to change that, but everything was already out. You see, so the French knew what they were doing. They wanted to kill Ambazonia. They wanted to assimilate us. You see, but what they are doing now is pure assimilation, annexation, and then they assimilate you. And that is why I usually tell people that the French don't know the difference between integration and assimilation. Because if you hear Paul Biya's speech in Paris, he will talk of integration, but that is pure assimilation he meant. Because when the Frenchman, when he takes something from you, he thinks that is diplomacy, but that's stealing. It's mafia. So they brought all that in order to kill down the spirit of Ambazonians, which actually to some extent they thought they had succeeded. So, and that is why they returned back to their name of La République du Cameroun, because they thought that they had achieved what they were out for, that total assimilation, which actually fails them today.
Hold it right there. Yes, they knew that psychologically they had conquered us, but now they had to go back to get their name. By so doing, they had completed their assimilation.
Exactly.
And now we are now part of them, and that is that occupation force, because we were now totally occupied and under occupation. And with that occupation, which is our major problem, they started now doing whatever an occupation nation will do by marginalizing us, by taking us away from the government, by also flooding us with their own administrators, right?
Exactly.
So now I would like you to focus on that occupation, because most of our leaders today, like I mentioned, they know only Ahijo and Biya. And the politics of these two leaders have always been to erase our own history. And then whatever they are talking, whatever people who knew, the older generation, I'm yet to understand or to see which younger people who were born in the 70s or to pay homage, to go back and talk to our forefathers and those who are remaining now. But they themselves, they only know something about the Ahijo and Biya regime. So they cannot understand what West Cameroon or Southern Cameroon used to be. Could you then, in that light, explain to us, for some of these people who are clamoring for federalism, and what can we really federate with the French Cameroon?
We cannot federate with French Cameroon, because if you look well, French countries don't federate. So the idea of federation was just brought in to deceive our people to look a bit towards Cameroon during the plebiscite, because they knew that Ahijo knew that if he doesn't come with that, our people will not vote in favor of Cameroon, because Cameroon is purely a centralized system.
You mean French Cameroon?
French Cameroon, yeah. French Cameroon is purely centralized. And during the plebiscite, they needed something to convince our people. So when they came, they brought in Ahijo after listening to the Nigerian Prime Minister
Tafawa
Tafawa Balewa. The French advised him to bring in federation instead of bringing in, because Nigeria was talking of integrating into the federal system. So now they advise Ahijo to talk about decentralization, where there will be two states equal in status. So that now was, our people saw that, okay, in these two alternatives, it is preferable to go in in the union where we will still maintain our autonomy. French Cameroon maintain theirs. We'll be running our affairs. They will be running theirs. But
hold it right there. Hold it right there, comrade. Yes, yeah. I believe that was really a little bit practiced until 1972.
Yes, it was. It was. Because the French were very careful. They told Ayijo that you have to do it gradually. Gradually. Because that was the word they used. Say, do it gradually. Because they knew that politically our people were very matured. Our population was very matured politically. So if they go directly to do what they did in 1972, then they will spoil the union, people will rebel. So what they did was to do it gradually. And in this gradual process, actually, it was to capture our people. They knew that with time, our people would now be used to it, and then they would now start dismantling what they were doing. So, and that happened. In 1966, they started now by bringing the whole country into a one political system.
And I quite remember, comrade, even in Bamenda, at the stadium, there were the Kale, whereby we saw gendarmes. They come, they will hurt, they will actually collect our parents and put them in the stadium to sit on mud. And I mean, that is something that we never really experienced under British Southern Cameroon. So that was the beginning of that occupation, right?
Yes. Even before the 1966, we should remember that in the British Southern Cameroon, there was nothing like censor. There were, newspapers were allowed to write whatever, even to criticize the prime minister, criticize the parliament. But by 1962, censorship was already in French Cameroon. And Ayijo was already transferring that gradually into the so-called federation, which people call it. And we should also remember that in that federation, people are saying Ayijo had already appointed an inspector general, which means the inspector general in that federation was just like Ayijo's eye. He was already there. So to me, I don't look it as a federation, but I look it as a way of, it was some kind of trap where our people went into believing that they were following brothers who had good faith, but of which it was all lies.
Okay, to get to that point, if it were really a federated state, right?
Yeah.
Southern Cameroon would have remained one block.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Then French Cameroon would have remained one block. They would have did their own administrative division the way they would see fit.
Exactly.
But now, like the divide and rule, they came over to us and divided us into two. The southern,
exactly.
The southwest, and the northwest.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. With that now, please, it's getting a little bit hot.
Yeah.
So let us get to the details now. How we then came. Now, how most Ambazonians today, some of them are clamoring for federation, and forgetting that we were an entity, and also instead of fighting that we are an occupied nation, we are talking more but about marginalization. We're not even supposed to be marginalized, because if we are talking about marginalization and all these other consequences, it's more or less like we have already given up.
Exactly.
Is that how you look at it?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what I look at it, and I argue with these federalists. You see, I have one of my cousins who I usually argue with him. He said, no, there was a federation. I said, no. And I asked him, who was the first mayor in Manu? Who was voted as first mayor if there was a federation? He could not answer me. I said, what was the federal national anthem? There was no federal national anthem. How do you have a federation without having a federal national anthem? What was the federal flag? You know, there was no federal flag. When we go now, you ask them who was the first federal president that was voted.
No. The two-star came when the idea of the federation came. And then the idea of the federation disappeared when the idea of unitary government came with one star.
Exactly. It was a continuation from the United. So they brought the 2 stars there.
Okay, you know, then this is history. This is history that our brothers and sisters, even though they have the energy today and they are fighting, I always would say that, you know, I grew up being told that what an old man can see sitting down, a young man, even with all the energy and strength, they cannot see standing on the tallest tree.
Exactly.
So, and that is why I would also say that it is very, very important that with the energy that this younger generation do have, they should always consult our elders. Because let me tell you, this, if we do not lean on them to be able to push us forward, because our struggle is a movement. It's not that which you listen from the Francophones or whatever. We have to listen to people who live through English Cameroon and know what freedom is like, what democracy is like. So now I want you to elaborate on this. Now, nowadays, you see, the very few years now, they have set, they give you a special status. If we were equal to start, East Cameroon and West Cameroon, who has the right to give someone a special status when you complain? Who has the right to organize a grand debate when we complain? Who has the right to say the bilingualism commission? Does East Cameroon or the authorities in Yaoundé, because they have that arrogance that they have colonized us to do this? And is this also not the beneficiaries of this current system, current regime? Our brothers and sisters, are they not the one, because they benefit from it, that they are clamoring for federalism and it still go? Please, can you shed light on that?
Yeah, exactly. Just as we were saying, when you ask them that, these people talking about federation, who was the first voted president? Because in the federation, you have to vote the president. You look at the Federation of Nigeria, there is the election for the president. You look even America, there is an election. But you ask, who was the first president of, who was the first federal president? You know, nobody will ask you, when was he elected? Nobody will answer, because they don't have it. Do you have a federal passport? There is none. So you see that Ayijo just imposed himself because he was a French handpicked. He came in and imposed himself, and then, you know, took out some of our people. And today you find this, some of our brothers see even quoting his federation. Some even tell you to go back to the 1961 talk. No, we've gone past that 1961 Fumban thing. With me, I don't talk about Fumban. That is history. We don't need to go back. We look at this, I'm looking at the present dispensation now that Cameroon annexed us. What is the way forward? And that's why we tell our brothers that, look, we cannot go to a federation that never existed. All along, Cameroon have been using the word federation. It was just a game. And that is why they abolished it. We should remember that the idea of federation came from French Cameroon Parliament. It was not a consensus between Ambazonia and, or let me use the word, British Southern Cameroon and French Cameroon. It was a consensus in the French Cameroon Parliament in Kribi under the UC, that the Union Camerounaise. Is them who brought that concept of federation, which Ayijo presented, backed by the French. So we were never there. So when our brothers, they made it very clearly. They told the parliamentarians that we are going to utilize that we are going to use it as a means to bring these people. When we bring them in, then we will go back to our name. That is how Ayijo convinced the MPs of French Cameroon to allow their constitution and the name of their country to be changed from La République du Cameroun to the United Republic of Cameroon. We should understand that part of the history, because most people don't understand why that name was changed. It was debated in the Parliament of French Cameroon. So they knew that with time they will come back to their original name after they must have assimilated us and occupied us. And they did that in 1984. Paul Biya signed a decree and they came back. So these our brothers clamoring for federation must understand that we cannot federate with French Cameroon. They don't practice, there's no French country that practice federation.
Okay, comrade.
Yeah.
I would like you now to put on your senior advisor's hat. I quite remember posing this question to the eminent Professor Anyangwe about unity. And he schooled me that we should talk but about solidarity. On that note, what advice, speak to the various leadership that are on the ground now. Dr. Sako, Dr. Ayaba, Comrade Akwanka, all the other ones, even our eminent Professor Anyangwe. What have you seen? You mentioned that there have been so many mistakes made. The essence of life is when you fall, make sure you look at the sky and get up.
Exactly.
We learn from our mistakes. What are some of these mistakes that you have seen that you can shed light so that in solidarity, we can pursue this common enemy?
Well, thank you for that. It's a very interesting question. You know, the first thing I usually like to tell people is the difference between unity and collaboration. And I think that when Professor is talking about solidarity, he means he's looking it towards collaboration. Because when you collaborate, you
solidified.
Yeah, with other people. For me, unity, you cannot fight for unity. Because unity for me is the result or the consequences of genuine collaboration. Which means when you are able to collaborate with each other or between yourself or among yourself, the result you get is unity. I mean, unity is automatically expressed where there is genuine collaboration. And that's why I see for us, some of us who are Christian, Christ tells us, come, let us reason. That reason is that come, let's collaborate. God does not tell you that come, let's unite. No, he tells you, come, let us reason. So because in the process of reasoning, unity is automatically expressed. And that is what I want our leaders, I will wish, not even one, but I will wish Ambazonians to think about that. If we want unity to express itself among or between Ambazonians, what we should do is to establish a genuine collaboration. Now, in collaboration itself, you can never establish a genuine collaboration when you don't communicate, which means the first element comes through communication. Ambazonians should be able to establish a clear method of communication between these various groups. Well, and when you establish that, collaboration grows. It grows by you consulting each other. For example, Dr. Sako wants to call Ghost Town on Monday or on Tuesday. He picks his phone. He rings Dr. Ayaba. Oh, J. Comrade, how are you doing today? Oh, fine. Please, I want to call a Ghost Town. These are my reasons. Can you get your group, think about it, and then get back to me. Is it necessary to call for ghost town today? How does it affect our population? Do you think our population are ready to accept that? If Ayabas look at it, he's not, it doesn't, it doesn't sound well. He might pick his phone and say, oh, bro, Boo Herbert. This is what Brasako is suggesting. Let's lobby. And maybe they call a conference of communication within them. And then they decide and say, okay, we'll put ghost town because it is good for our people. It is good to actually diminish the power of the annexationist or the occupier. From there, they will not agree, so that when Sako now is going out to call for a ghost town, or maybe it's Ayaba, the other people will barely come and support. If Sako says there's a ghost town on Tuesday, Ayaba must come and say, yes, and the restoration forces of Dr. Sako will enforce in Bamenda, for example, and then the ADF will be,
of Dr. Ayaba
will be in Boya to enforce
collaboration.
Yeah, so that collaboration comes. Once that collaboration comes, you see unity begins to express itself. So we cannot be fighting for unity when we cannot communicate in the first place. We cannot collaborate, and then we are talking of unity. It will never happen because there is unity.
Hold it right there. Let me take your memory back.
Yeah,
I quite remember that is the spirit of Ambazonians in the 60s and in the 50s.
Exactly.
You could see that the opposition will actually debate and campaign together.
Exactly.
That is why sometimes I say that for people who have been brought up during the Francophone regime under Ahidjo and Biya, all they know is what the Francophone system has brainwashed us to think.
Yeah.
They do not really think that you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah, that's what I talk of commandment.
And our people, we need to learn, and it's so painful that this generation is a generation that claims itself that they are educated and knowledgeable. And they always look with disdain at our leaders in the 60s, that they were not educated, that they made so many mistakes, but they could collaborate. They were humble enough to respect each other and disagree behind closed doors, but actually work together in public.
Exactly.
And I believe that was the spirit of the Anglo-Saxon mentality that came as that we grew up. I am not that very old, but I could really imagine, and I grew up hearing someone like Shamour For and all these people. They were not educated, but they respected each other.
Yeah, you are right.
I think that our leaders today, they need to pick up the phone and learn from these elders, because what they are doing today, some of them claim that they know so much, and because of the accolades that come from being a president or whatever. But understand that, if you are the pot that is sitting on the 3 stones that cook this, you don't have to forget the 3 stones.
Of course.
Because you have to go to the cradle to get the source. So go ahead, comrade.
Yeah. So communication is very important to establish collaboration and to get unity. So these leaders and especially Ambazonians themselves, I think that the Ambazonians themselves are helping the leaders to take the extreme position they are taking, because the power is in the hands of Ambazonians, not in the hands of these leaders. Ambazonians have the power to tell these leaders that, look, if you don't want to start communicating, that's the least thing is communication. Start communicating with each other, and then you build collaboration, and then the unity will come. Because the idea of forcing, saying that, oh, this man should come under me, or this other one should come under me, it doesn't show your ability to collaborate. You who is asking the other man to come under you merely tells the other people that you can't collaborate. Because where there is genuine collaboration, you should be able to tolerate. You should be able to see why this other man is doing something the way, or is looking at something different, the different way from you. So once that is not there, we'll always have problem. So we should start by communicating, calling each other. Take your phone, call a man from the Sako Cam or IG or the AGOFC IG, discuss with the person, and then from there you start, you help now bring these leaders and tell them that, look, we think that we can collaborate. And this is very important because some of us have met big challenges in this revolution because we went out there with the wrong message. Just to answer your question where you asked the question about that some of the mistakes we did. We went out there from 2016. I can remember that when we were fighting for Barrister Bala to include federation in the agenda which they had in the discussion with the Cameroon government, it was not easy because federation actually was not in the agenda, but it later on came in. But we knew that by calling for federation, Cameroon government will not accept because they are focused on centralization and bend to see that we do not collaborate with them. But we knew that when that came in, it will create the dynamics, which of course it did. And we will be able now to bring forward the clear agenda of us separating totally from French Cameroon.